Hello friends, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another episode of my behind the scenes series taking you along as I am learning digital pattern making. In today's episode, I am going to be tackling my first official project of the Confident Pattern Making Grading course. Up until now, I've been working on drafting all of the various different pattern pieces, which are called pattern blocks, that you then do pattern manipulations on and turn into any new pattern and style that your heart desires. So I have drafted my front and back bodice blocks, my skirt blocks, my sleeve block, and my pants block. And if you want to see details for any of those, you can go check out the previous 4 episodes. But in today's video, I'm going to be taking those pattern blocks, specifically the sleeve block and the bodice block, and I'm going to be applying pattern manipulation techniques to turn those pattern blocks into pattern pieces to make a button-up shirt. In this course, creating and sewing a button-up shirt is our first main sewing project where we learn how to manipulate our pattern blocks to make a new pattern, and in the process of making the button-up shirt can then actually test the fit of our pattern blocks. So for me, making my button-up shirt is going to allow me to test if I correctly drafted my front and back bodice block and my sleeve block. Through making my button-up shirt, I'm going to be able to make adjustments to the fit and also make adjustments to my original pattern blocks if need be. So without further ado, let's dive into pattern manipulation and sewing up my first button-up shirt. I will say I have never actually, I was gonna say I've never sewn a button-up shirt before. I actually have sewn button-up shirts before, but I've used a previously made pattern. I've never actually drafted and created my own pattern before because I have always thought that creating a button-up shirt pattern seemed super intimidating. I have helped students do it in the past and honestly am so proud of the fact that they created those patterns even though I hadn't, and I was just helping them along the way. So this is putting me back in the position of a student, which is why I've been loving taking this course, is getting back to really stepping into the position of a student and learning new skills, which is really, really fun. So this is going to teach me a lot through the process of sewing up a button-up shirt and creating a pattern for it, and also allow me to get comfortable with pattern manipulation on Adobe Illustrator. I'm familiar with pattern manipulation on paper, so I know on Adobe Illustrator it's going to be very similar, but it's just still getting the hang of and getting comfortable with all of the different settings and functions of Adobe Illustrator. But so far I've really loved the ease and the accessibility of digital pattern drafting and making, and so I'm just excited to continue seeing what I learn. So now let's dive in. All right, I have drafted a majority of my front and back pattern pieces for my button-up shirt based on my original pattern block. However, I ran into some issues with the shoulder length of my front bodice being like 2 centimeters longer than the shoulder length of my back bodice, and that was because there were discrepancies in my original pattern block, which I had to go back and adjust and fix, and I'm hoping that doesn't mean I have to completely redraft my sleeve block, but I feel like it does. We'll see. But I did make those adjustments in order to correctly trace off the yoke pieces for my front and back button-up pattern pieces. However, some of the lines are looking a little bit weird in one of the sections, so I reached out to some of the TAs and the instructors in my pattern making class. So there's like a Facebook group and you can post questions, and so I reached out to Jess or Victoria or Nat. They're the ones who answer all of our questions, and so I'm going to pause on what I've been drafting so far for the pattern because I don't want to do any more work that I might have to come back and tweak. So I'm going to wait to hear from them and see what their recommendation is for the adjustments I should make and how I should move forward. Once I hear from them, then I will come back and continue working on this pattern. So far, the pattern adjustments have been pretty easy for taking the block and turning it into a regular button-up shirt pattern, because you're just tracing the outside and turning like curved lines into straight lines. I know once I get into the collar area and the plackets for the sleeves, it's going to get more difficult. So we're getting through the easy stuff first, and then we will tackle the more difficult things. Okay, yesterday I finished going through the videos for drafting out the button-up shirt, and I finished my sleeve and the placket and the cuff of the sleeve, and then I also have the collar. Before that I was working on the bodice and the yoke. So now all of my pieces are drafted out and they have pattern markings, and now I just need to go in and add seam allowance. Once seam allowance is added, then I can work on actually sewing up my mock-up or toile or muslin, however you call it. I usually just call it a mock-up. I don't know why, but that's usually what I call it, and actually see if all my measurements for my pattern block actually work out and fit how they are supposed to. So for reference, these are currently what my button-up shirt pattern pieces look like. Now I just have to go and extend the edges and add seam allowance so that I can actually sew this up in my size. But look at these! So crazy that I created all of these from my base pattern piece. Alright, so yesterday I finished adding all of my seam allowance to my button-up shirt pattern and also truing it to make sure like all of the edges and sides were good to go. So now we're ready to actually cut it out of fabric and sew it up. So as you know from watching my pants video, I took my drafted pants, I overlaid it on my tiling template, and I printed it out, taped it together just like a regular PDF pattern. But for my button-up shirt, I have way more pattern pieces, which would mean that it would be way more pieces of paper that I'd be printing, and then that's also just a time-consuming process of assembling it all together. So I have invested in a projector to project my pattern pieces onto fabric and cut them out and sew them out. I feel like this is kind of the new trend in sewing and the new direction that sewing honestly is going. So many of the indie pattern designers that I love and follow and buy their patterns and sew their patterns, and even pattern tests that I have done, they now offer all of their patterns in PDF printed home assembling versions and projector versions. And so I want to learn how to project my sewing patterns so that I don't have to print out tons of pieces of paper. I feel like it makes the sewing and cutting and pattern cutting time like so much quicker. So anyways, I invested in an Epson projector. It's a regular projector that would typically be used in like classrooms, but you can actually use it as a short throw projector for pattern sewing. And so it came highly recommended from both Victoria and Jess, and also a number of people and those pattern projector sewing Facebook groups. So I'll link it down below if you're interested in that. Today I'm also going to try to figure out how to set it up and how to project my sewing patterns so that I can cut out my button-up shirt and sew it together. So I'm going to add the whole kind of projector aspect of sewing into this video for my button-up shirt because I'm figuring it all out at the same time. Okay, so I added in all the cords and plugged them into the projector. It's turning on, making some noise you might be able to hear. So now I have to figure out how to connect it to my computer, and then also how to like pull up the projector files for cutting. So anyways, this is going to be a learning process. I'm gonna have to pull up a lot of YouTube videos to make sure I'm doing it correctly. But I know there's also a website called like Projector Sewing. I think they have a ton of tutorials and helpful videos and articles, so I'm gonna pull that up. Now the light is here. I will link it down below, and I also link the Facebook group if you're wanting to research a little bit about projector printing. I found both of these resources super helpful, and both resources come highly recommended by a lot of sewists that I follow and a lot of people who are doing projector cutting and sewing. So yeah, we're gonna get this thing set up and then we're gonna start cutting it out. All right, that took entirely too long to set up. I think I was sitting there for like 3 hours trying to troubleshoot getting the projector to communicate with my computer when I plugged it in. But now it's working, even though the HDMI plug is a little finicky, so I'm having to be very gentle with that. Once I got the projector connected and communicating, I then had to like calibrate my projector screen to my cutting mat to get the correct proportions so that when you actually project a pattern, it's the correct size. I think I did it correctly. I was using like a free website, so I'll link it below. Now you can't really see it, but I do have a pattern piece projected onto here. This is my bodice. So we're gonna figure out how to do this and see if it is accurate to my drafted pattern, and get this cut out. I think once I get the hang of the projecting aspect and the calibration and the size and all that, projecting is going to be really, really great. But as of now, I think if I printed it off, it might have been a little bit quicker. But learning new things throughout the course. But I'm learning a lot of new things through taking this course and challenging myself to grow my skills in a lot of different ways, and I love the freedom that projectors give you once you figure it out. So yeah, we're gonna see how this goes and sew it up for the rest of the video. Okay, so I have all of my button-up shirt pieces cut out. I think they're all cut accurately based on the projection. I did all the calibrations how I was supposed to, so I think we're good. And here's all the pieces and the directions. All right, so here are some of my pieces. The rest are on my ironing board. I'm gonna follow the directions on my laptop and we'll see how this goes. Alright, it's a bit late in the day and therefore the sun is setting, and I didn't really want to turn on all my overhead lights because it just felt really cozy in here. But this is the current progress of my button-up shirt. I am actually really happy with it. Obviously I haven't even sewn the sides together or put the collar or the sleeves, which are literally like kind of the main parts, to bring this shirt together. But I did want to talk about the fact, even though this is a test and a mock-up and a toile to even just check the measurements of my bodice blocks, and this is like mock-up fabric, I had an idea for creating like a more fun button-up shirt version. It was kind of inspired by a Dam's in a Matter oversized button-up shirt that I saw. Anyways, I decided to add this ruffle to the inside placket to just kind of see what it looked like. I also have a ruffle cut to add to the bottom edges of my collar, so we'll see how that goes. If this mock-up actually fits and all my math was good, I can actually have this as a wearable toile, which will be really nice. So let's keep sewing. Alright, so quick little update on my button-up shirt toile mock-up. I am taking a break from the sewing process because I realized there are adjustments I need to make in the fit, and this is actually one of the steps in testing out my button-up shirt, is to put it on, draw lines where there needs to be adjustments made, and then move forward. And I realized that it doesn't really make sense to keep sewing it all together when I need to make adjustments to the sleeve for it to fit better. It was a little too tight around my bicep, so I'm going to go and do a bicep adjustment and see if that helps. And then that is going to a little bit change the sleeve curve because it was a little too long to go into my armhole. And then there are also some armhole adjustments I need to make in the button-up shirt, so I'm gonna work on that on Adobe Illustrator, and then I guess I'm gonna cut out new pieces of fabric and re-sew it together and then see how that works. So a little frustrating having to go back. I was really hoping to be done and get to move on with the button-up shirt and go to the fun projects and patterns that I want to do, but I know these adjustments need to be made to make sure that my actual block fits how it's supposed to. So that's where we're at. Alright, it's another day in the studio working on my button-up shirt, and today I am having to do a lot of revisions and redrafting based on how my current mock-up of my button-up shirt is fitting. And I will say, full transparency, yesterday working on this, I was getting super frustrated because I realized that in order to make these alterations and these adjustments from my button-up shirt to my original pattern block, the adjustments themselves weren't horrible, but making the adjustments to my pattern block meant that in order to make a new button-up shirt to test those adjustments, I would essentially have to redraft many of the pieces for my button-up shirt in order for them to fit properly with the adjustments. And so I was just super overwhelmed. So I took a break yesterday. I'm coming back to it and I'm feeling a little bit more positive. So the adjustments weren't super major. I actually think that I might just sew up my bodice block to test the adjustments I made to the armhole rather than re-sewing the entire button-up shirt. And if those adjustments check out, then I will go forward and actually re-sew my button-up shirt to have the corrected armhole and then also the corrected sleeve, because I had to do a bicep adjustment and change some things about my sleeve curve. So that's where we are today, and I think this is definitely what has kept me in the past from making a button-up shirt, because there are some technical tricky things. But I know throughout the whole process it is teaching me a lot. I am learning a lot. And every adjustment I make and every redraft I have to do is continuing to solidify pattern making skills into my brain. But in the moment, it sometimes is not ideal and not the most fun. But this is the process of what I am learning and how I'm learning it in my experience. So today we're off to continue making those adjustments, redraft some things, and sew a bodice block to test the fit. This button-up shirt has been quite the experience, and right now I'm not even wearing a button-up shirt, as you can tell. So I think I mentioned this in my last video. I ran into some issues on my button-up shirt. Totally normal. Essentially the reason I was sewing it was to test my bodice block, then make adjustments to that pattern. But instead of just sewing up a brand new button-up shirt to test out the adjustments I had made to my pattern block, I decided to just sew up a regular bodice block and sleeve because it's way less steps than sewing the entire button up. Test out the adjustments I've made, and if everything is good to go, then actually sew my button up. So this is version 2 of my bodice block, and I think I have figured out all of the issues. It has been quite a while since I have done adjustments to a pattern and a bodice block for fitting, so it's definitely taking me back to my teacher days in the classroom, helping students fit their pattern blocks and their mock-ups. So anyways, this is what we have now. I, on version 2, shifted over my front darts 2 centimeters because they were really far in and not quite at my bust point. And then I also was testing to see if my sleeve adjustments that I did, shortening my sleeve curve, fit into my armhole, and they do. I think it's fitting okay. Like, I think there's always tweaks you can make to a sleeve to make it better. I don't want to be like so specific and spend all my time on my sleeve because I would really like to move on, but so far it's fitting around the bicep, around the curve. It looks good. I can move my arm. It does feel like a bit, I don't know, tight underneath here, so I'm not quite sure what that is. I did move some of my armhole over, so maybe that is that. I'm not sure, but anyways, I think I'm good to move on and actually redraft my button-up shirt with the adjustments that I've made, knowing that everything should kind of fit going forward. Hello friends, we are reaching a very anticlimactic end to this video where I have been working on drafting out a button-up shirt pattern and sewing up that button-up shirt to test my pattern blocks and make adjustments as needed. And the reason why I say anticlimactic end to this video is because I decided I'm going to end this video without actually having completed the button-up shirt and redrafting it and re-sewing it again and actually showing you like the whole finished thing. And here's the reason why. So as you know, as you've been watching through this specific video installment and episode, I drafted my button-up shirt pattern. I started to sew my button-up shirt. I did the test and realized that as it was created for, the reason we were doing the button-up shirt is to test the fit and then make adjustments on it. And so as I was trying it on before I'd even finish it, I realized there were adjustments I needed to make to that current button-up shirt and then apply those adjustments to my pattern blocks, which meant that it didn't make sense to finish that original version of the button-up shirt because there were so many things I needed to tweak and it didn't even fit as is, so I needed to go back and make those tweaks to my original pattern. And then as you saw in the video, I decided to just sew up a bodice block and sleeve version from my just original pattern blocks to test my adjustments and then make final adjustments that needed to be done, rather than going through the whole process of redrafting the button-up shirt, because that's a really in-depth process, and if you know you're gonna have to make tweaks again, it doesn't make sense to like go through all those steps. So anyways, after sharing my adjustments and my updated blocks in the Facebook group for my pattern making class, and then I also shared it on social media and I tagged Victoria and Jess, and Jess reached out and suggested that if I wanted, I could just move on to my personal pattern project and not actually complete the button-up shirt since I had actually made the adjustments I needed to my original pattern. And I'm honestly so thankful that she suggested that, because I was kind of feeling burnt out and uninspired and unmotivated working on my button-up shirt, because I was really just wanting to move on to a personal pattern and something I was super duper excited about. And so that is why I'm ending this video without actually having finished my button-up shirt. And so that's the reality of being a sewist, and sometimes realizing you need to move on to a new project to kind of get your groove and creativity back, and also the reality of taking this course, knowing that I was able to make the adjustments I needed to in kind of a different way to my patterns, and now can move on and start actually working on my first personal project pattern, which I'm really excited about. I'm so excited to share that video with you because creating that pattern has been really, really fun, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that pattern. So with all that being said, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing my process of learning to draft out a button-up shirt, sewing part of it, making adjustments to my pattern, and going through all the steps that come with creating and designing patterns and going back to the drawing board and having things that don't work out and having to problem solve through them, because that's honestly the true reality of being a sewist and learning digital pattern making. So I think at some point I will revisit this button-up shirt because I do want to give myself the challenge to sew it up and be able to have a button-up shirt that I've made myself and put like my own spin on it. But I know right now, if I try to focus on that project, it's going to take a lot of the inspiration and drive that I have away, and I want to apply that inspiration and motivation to projects that I'm really passionate about. And honestly, what the crux of this course is about is taking your own ideas and inspiration and bringing them to life. So stay tuned for that. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching my videos. Make sure if you're not subscribed to my channel, you hit that subscribe button, and if you liked what you saw in today's video, give it a thumbs up. And if you've ever had your own experience sewing up a button-up shirt or starting to sew a project and then abandoning it and moving on to something else, drop a comment below and tell me that story from your own experience. Thank you so much for watching. Happy sewing, everyone. Bye.